All right, guys, thank you for coming. We're going to be talking about Orisa Aje, divinity of wealth, prosperity, exchange. So that I hope that by the end of this presentation, you guys have a better understanding on how money and wealth works. Wealth is an energy. Wealth is an Orisha. It's an Irumole. It is perhaps the most I would say complicated Orisha to deal with because everybody wants it. And so, because this Rumale is aware that everybody wants it, she's picky about who she's going to be going. And there's a lot of rules, a lot of laws that you guys were gonna be learning, so that you understand how this divinity works. So that without further ado, I'm going to start the presentation. If you have questions, write it down. I'm gonna try to make this presentation as smooth as possible. So let's move on. Okay. All right. So I want to start asking for all the irumoles, their blessings. So we're going to start with this Odu, which is Oyekun Owarin. This Odu is very, very important because it teaches that before we greet Orunmila himself, we need to greet Orisha Aje first. So this is what this Odu is saying. On the left you have the Yoruba, on the right you have the translation. So it's speaking about how the fat tray with its deep face, the entrance gate with its white chest, Kais Ifa for Osuniji, the first child of Olokun. It is Aye we should greet, it is Aye we should praise before we greet Barapetu in the morning. So Osuniji is one of the names for Orisha Aje. It's one of the secret names that she has. And Barapetu, it's one of the names of the many names that Orunmila has. So as you can see, these verse right here, and if you guys can take maybe a screenshot, I'm gonna be recording the video, posting it later on YouTube. But yeah, you can take a screenshot of this, so that every morning when you wake up, even if you don't have Orisha yet, you can still pray to her, to your Ori, before you even greet Orunmila. So that's just shows you how important this Orisha is. We're supposed to greet her first. All right. So right now, I want to talk about kind of like the journey, right? The journey that we're gonna be going through. So first is the origins, right? So this is where wealth itself comes from. In Yoruba cosmology, how Olodumare commissioned Olokun to make the first type of currency with what it was salt. Second, we're going to talk about the sacred stories, because every Isheshe stories carries theology. There, we're going to talk about the relationship between Aje, Ori, and character, right, which is the heart of the class. Four, we're going to talk about the type of Aje. I have shared some of them with you guys, but we're going to go more in depth. We're going to talk about what are the Orishas that are related with this Orisha. And finally, we're going to be talking about certain practices that you guys can do so that you can start invoking this important divinity into our life. All right. So, every economy on earth has a spiritual ancestor. So in this case, ours begin with a question Olokun asked herself. What do I have the most? So Olokun, for those of you guys who don't know, it's the Rumele of the deepness of the ocean, right? So some people believe Yemoja is the Orisha of the ocean, but Yemaya is the mother of fish, the representation of maternity, and also it's related with babies. But in reality, Olokun is the Orisha of the ocean, and if you divide the word Olo Okun, Olo, everything that is Olo, it's the owner in Yoruba, and Okun, it's ocean or the sea, right? So, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but the word salary. Oh, there's someone coming. Hold on. Lafia. Thank you guys. So yeah, happy Father's Day. Okay. So the word salary actually comes from salt. If you guys don't know, just I think it's the word the etymology is it's salarium, the salt payment, right? So our tradition knew this truth before economics name it, right? So you guys had to remember about the story of Ori when Ayala Momping had this character who wanted to have a great Ori, right? So he paid Ayala Momping with a bag of salt. So Ayala Momping gave him the best Ori that he had in his shop, right? So that kind of tells you a little bit how salt opened doors, you know. Then what happened is that salt turned into cowrie shells. So that was the exchange currency that we have from salt. We went to cowrie shells, which also comes from Olokun, right? Cowrie shells, all the cowrie shells from the ocean. So then Olodumare declared the earth as a marketplace, right? Let me let somebody in. Okay. So Olodumare declared that the world is a marketplace, right? And then the divinity of exchange, Orisa Aje, holds the key to life on earth if we put that into perspective. So who is Orisa Aje? Who is she? So there's five anchors here that I have. Well, number one, she's a feminine Orisha, though some stories might present her as masculine. So there's a duality in this itself. You know, fortune really has no gender. Number two, she's the daughter of Olokun, right? So this is kind of like a literal truth inside the metaphor. So the oceans holds gold, platinum, pearls. The ocean holds secrets, mysteries, and in reality, all life came out of them, right? So the child or Orisha Aje inherits what belongs to the parent, right? Number three, she when she manifests, you know, she becomes treasure itself. You know, cowries, hams, gold. We're going to be talking about a story with Orisha Osain, so the Irumele of herbs, that will kind of like give a better explanation about this perspective, right? Uh, and also, you know, Agba Orisha, you know, that's one of the orikis for Orisha Aje, which means the elder among the Orisha. You know, Ajiki, the one we wait to greet. So, and last but not least, you know, she's not abstraction. You know, her we have an actual shrine that we receive. So it's an irumula that it's also received. There's no initiation in Orisha Aje, but we do receive it. Okay. So there's something really important that I want you guys to understand. There's a distinction between Aje, wealth, and Owo, actual physical money, right? So I want you to take your time here to understand that, you know, Aje is not money. Owo is money. You know, the bill, you know, the title, the position, the tangible thing, right? Aye is the energy that makes exchange possible at all. So it's the divinity of transaction itself. It's kind of like a way of, it's kind of like an intermediary between us and the supernatural forces at the same time. So, you know, Owo can sit in your pocket, right? Physical money can sit in your pocket, but Aye cannot. Aye is why the money in your pocket either multiplies or becomes salt and water. So every time you see Ire Aye, you know, this is the well that flows through the effort and the sacrifice of your Ori. So that's the distinction. And then Owo is kind of like the income, right? The income through your profession and your studies. So when you go to consultation, right, you need to kind of like no difference between these two energies. Okay, so we're gonna talk about Aye's own theology of life on Earth, right? So what she did is that she told the first humans that they needed to understand that this world is a marketplace. We did not come here to accumulate. We came here to exchange. We came here to exchange with each other, right? And with the energies, so the orishas, so that our spirit can evolve. So trade itself is not a profane activity in Isheshe. It is actually the structure of existence. But when Orisha Ye gave advice to humanity, she also gave a warning that it's kind of like shield, you know. She said that we will have to cry for her. So she knew that she was going to be very, very necessary in our destiny. So wealth is not an optional thing in our destiny. You know, it is actually structural. Odu Obara Irosum speaks about how Orumila himself wept for lack of money, spouse, children. So he made a bow, and then I want you to notice the order of the blessings, right? In reality, there's one missing here, but the most important blessing that is missing here is Iraiku, which is longevity, right? So when you have longevity, you have the opportunity to study, to grow. You have the opportunity to learn, to train your ori, right? And then after you have that, you have we ask for iraje, which is wealth. If you have iraje, then you have the opportunity to establish yourself with someone and then have kids and then so on and so forth, so that even the order of blessings that we have in our life, we should be careful about the order of blessings we ask. So this is also a very important learning lesson here, is that do not bring children to this world if you don't have wealth, if you don't have what means to help them. So it's very, very important that you guys have clear that there's a time for everything. And Ishashe is very, very demanding about that. I mean, I have babalaos that they will always say, you know, I don't need a car because I need a house, because I need children. And also for me, a car is not as important as a house or a spouse. So that's very important in this tradition. So now I want to come to a very beautiful story here, and maybe the most important, one of the most important stories, is the story of Aye and Ore. So Aye and Ore, it's Ore, it's like friend, right? But we're talking about the metaphysical aspects. And Odu Befunfun Law talks about how long before Orishaye and Ore came to the earth, these were two very powerful forces that were living from heaven to earth. One of them was Orishaye, and the other one was Ore, the spirit of friendship. So before the departure, Ifa instruct them both to make a bow so that they can both be recognized, so that doors can open for them, so that people can welcome them, praise them, and etc. Right? So Orishaye makes sacrifice, but Ore did not make sacrifice. So when they came to the world, everybody started to praise Orishaye. Everybody wanted Orishaye. On the other hand, Ore's experience was very different, you know. So friendship was overlooked. So Ore lived in hardship, in poverty, and was struggling while Orishaye started flourishing, right? So many years passed, and Ore was kind of like tired of suffering, so he went for consultation. To his surprise, the same Odu that he saw in heaven, he saw on earth, and the Babalaos remind Ore, hey, you forgot to do a bow in heaven. These are the materials for your ebo. So there was a little problem here. Ore did not have money, but he remembered that Orishaye was his pulse, so he had no option. He went to Orisa Aje, and Ore asked for a loan. So Aje kind of like agrees. Okay, okay, I give you the money. Here, take the money. So Ore used the money for the sacrifice. But what happened? As time passed, Ore's life began to improve. His life began to improve. His message went to Olodumare. Olodumare started opening doors for Ore, but Aye now has become a little bit proud and arrogant because Orishaye was surrounded by fame, by wealth, by admiration. Everybody wanted Aye, right? So one day, Aye came to collect the debt, and what should have been a simple conversation between friends turned into a really, really bitter argument. Hold on, let me leave someone. Okay. It turned into a really, really bitter argument. Harsh words were engaged, exchanged. So there was some temper that rose. And in a moment of anger, Aye grabbed a stick and struck one of Ore's eyes. So there was blood everywhere. People started rushing to the scene. So everybody will think you will think everybody will side with Aye, but everybody started to be like, hey, look at you. I mean, you're full of everything. You have money, you have wealth, and yet you throw your friend in the eye. You're full of arrogance. You should have some compassion for your friend, right? So they kind of like the people that saw this, they kind of like saw wealth without character. Uh, and at that moment, Aye learned a very important lesson that should echo today, which is, wealth alone does not command respect. No matter how much money a person possesses, if they abandon a good character, kindness, a sense of justice, they can lose their honor, and people can stop celebrating them. And also, this story teaches something very, very important, and that is do not mix friendship with business. It's not going to end up good. And so that's another important lesson that this Odu teaches. And as a matter of fact, if it comes from divination for someone who's doing a business, we as Babalaos recommend and do not do it with your close friends because you might lose the friendship. So that's one of the beautiful lessons that Obefun has for us here. Okay, so like I said, do not mix friendship with business. Number two, pay what you own. There are many Ifa verses that has as ewo, as taboo, do not borrow money, or if you borrow and you are going to collect the debt, do it nicely. Don't be arrogant. Don't use force, violence to recover your debt because it might end up bad for you or the people that owe you. So this is also another important thing that we learn on this Odu is that Orishaye doesn't like blood. And when we do sacrifice for Orishaye, we try to use things in top of her, and we put the blood in a different plate, and we start to touch her with our fingers. And she despises that because kind of like reminds her of the lesson that she learned with Ore, and it's important to put friendship sometimes uh, in top of debt or things you borrow, because in reality, like I said, we come to this world to exchange and uh, give and take, right? So because of the story, like I said, blood never touches the vessel of Aje after consecration, right? So if an animal is involved, the blood is given outside the pot, and in some cases, we appease her without blood at all. So that's one of the lessons. So the foods that we give Orisha Ye, since cheese and Orisha Funfun, which means a white Orisha, are also things that we get here, like kuru, akara. If we have to pour palm oil, we don't do it directly either. We put it in a separate container so that her energy is neutral, right? So we don't use salt in her adimus, which is the offerings. All right. So this slide, I name it Destiny decides the size of the harvest. I want to talk about the axis of the whole theology. Aye does not work alone. She works through Ori. So Ori Rere, a blessed head. Wealth is written into destiny itself, right? Let me leave somebody. So, with Oriburuku, which is the head that sabotages the road or your destiny, when people speak of, luck and bad luck, what they are actually describing is the dispensation of Ori, right? So you remember our class in Ori, where one's children, where one's well spouse has to visit their own Ori, right? So Ori in reality is the beginning of everything, you know. And then there's another Orisha here, very important, which is Ogun, because it's a destination we cut, a road, which is what we collect at the end of the month after the labor, which is the salary. So that belongs to Orisha Ogun. The harvest size belongs to Orisha. So Orisha Ogun is the Orisha that is in charge of work. Is the Orisha that will compensate you when you work. So the golden rule on the right here is, to keep an Orisha content, we must keep Aye content. So even Orumila, even Ori, that is how central she is, right? So now, now we will learn the virtues of Orisha Ye and how we have her content in our life. Okay, so the first important lesson, and this one is very practical, is that Aye wants you to see you working. She does not support people that are lazy, straight up. So if people do a ball or they receive Orisha Ye, they might think that all the prayers, the rituals, the spiritual work can replace effort. Well, in Isheshe, it is the opposite. Spiritual work helps and blesses the effort you are already making. So Aye wants to see that you're trying. Right. All right. Sorry, guys. Um, so yes, Orisha Oye wants to see you working. She does not like laziness. Second lesson is that your work should bring some joy beyond just making money, guys. Okay? Money that is earned through constant misery and resentment rarely stays for long. It comes and goes. This does not mean that money is bad or that we should avoid it. Money is just a tool that helps us to obtain the things that we need for peace, for comfort, and for a better life for us, right? And the third lesson is that Aye values order and cleanliness. She is the Orisha that will inspect the home before she settles there. So people that are blessed with Aye, they need to take care of their surroundings. They need to stay healthy. They need to take showers. They need to make sure that their houses are clean. Very, very important. Okay. So Orisha Aye is an Orisha that respects cleanness and people that live organized. So it is also advised that people who want to have the divinity of wealth to come and visit them in their house, they need to paint their house white. Okay, so having white walls, white houses will bring many, many blessings to you. Another important lesson is that when Aye blesses one person and not another, there will be jealousy. Okay, so instead of asking, what sacrifices, discipline, or hard work brought that success, people they simply prefer to use accuse you of cheating or scamming or taking shortcuts. So Ifa actually teaches a very different lesson in Odu Okwani Iwori, which is when food is scarce and resources are limited, the answer is simple. Pick up the hoe and the machete and get to work. Hard work reduces poverty. So this is the one of the, I would say, fundamental teachings of Ifa regarding prosperity. Okay. So I want to talk about the values that will make you keep Orishaye in your house. So the first virtue is effort, right? Her second virtue is discipline. And there are a couple of rules here that I want you to understand. Okay. First is that earning money must be accompanied by responsible spending. Okay, money should not be wasted on unnecessary things. So if someone seeks the blessing of Aye, try to only squander what they received. It's better that they never. If they're going to squander, it's better that they never receive the blessing at all, right? So second, and this may look very simple, but the smell of money, it's something that Orishaye likes. So with my Orishaye, I try to put different bills from different countries, make sure that they're new, so that that particular smell that brand new bills have, right? But not only that, I try to put things in my Orishaye, like different things like gold. Gold is an element that Orishaye loves. So for the ladies here, or gold, it's something that you should wear if you want to attract the divinity of Aye into your life, especially those who are related with Orisha Oshun. Okay, so it might seem simple, but yes, it works. So third, Orisha Aje favors those who practice discipline with their resources. People that know how to save money, planners, investors, are said to remain under her blessing. So wealth grows where there is wisdom and self-control. If you want wealth in your life, make sure you know these disciplines. Be a saver, be a planner. Don't spend money on unnecessary things. Okay, so it's very important that you know this. So just as you cannot sell mangoes without a mango tree, prosperity also has to be supported by honest work, by businesses, skills, investments, of something that is also legitimate. So Orishaye is a divinity that she needs to see where your wealth comes from. Okay, so like I said, if you want to sell mangoes, make sure you have a tree of mangoes, right? So number four is that Aye is protected of those under her care. So if someone here is protected by this divinity, this Irumole, believe me, she is going to fight for you. And how does Orishaye fight for you? He will go to the house of your enemies and will make them poor, will make their well salt and water. So, if someone attacks her devotees out of jealousy, envy, or malice, they might find themselves facing the consequences of provoking a very force that everybody depends on. So be careful if you see someone who's wealthy, if you see someone who is doing good. Ask yourself why first, instead of criticizing them. You don't know if this person maybe started a small company and then the company grow to become something successful. Not everything has to be shady businesses. So I want to talk about another story here, and Ifa is very, very wise about um, how it gives stories for us to learn. There's many verses where Orishaye came to the world, but at the end, what we want to do is learn. We want to learn what the divinity of Ifa has for us. So there's another story that when Aye came to the world and she went for consultation, and the diviners gave Aye three consoles, right? The three consoles were wherever money enters powerfully, you need to treat it with responsibility, right? So if you don't treat money with responsibility or wealth, it will dissolve, right? The second is whoever brags and makes public of their wealth, Aye flees from them. So this one is very important. If you are someone who is blessed with the divinity of Aye, of wealth, don't show up. Be discreet, be humble, because if you start bragging or Ishaye, it's gonna be like, I don't like you. I don't like people to resemble the negative aspects that I have. So very important, right? Uh, when you read stories about the Orishas and you read the negative aspects of those Orishas, it's not really that those Orishas kind of like how can I? I'm gonna say this better. Those are things that you're supposed to learn so that you don't repeat them. Okay. So if you read Orishas about Ogun, who was violent and he destroyed a town, and then all of a sudden he came back to himself. In that particular Ordu is just saying, violence is bad. Don't destroy it. Be someone who construct instead of destroying. So very, very important. Be discreet. Discretion above all. Like I said, if you have abundance in your life, put your tongue inside your mouth. Be discreet about the economies that are coming into your life. All right, let's move on. Remember, I told you guys about Usain, right? So Usain and Orishaye and Eshu were working together, right? And Eshu wanted to kind of like walk around and do his chores, and he's like, he gave Aye to Osain, right? And he was like, hey, please take care of her. I'll be back. So Eshu left, and then a couple of days passed by. Then he came back, and Osain was working in his hub, and he's like, hey, what happened to Orishaye? And then Osain is like, I ate it. So Aisha was like, what do you mean you ate it? I mean, we need her back. So then Aisha and Osain prepare omiero, which is sacred water with herbs and certain elements that Orishaye likes. And then Osain swallowed that water and he started vomiting Aye, but then Aye came back in the forms of treasures, cowrie shells, pearls, coins, gold. She transformed into wealth, right? So uh, this there's kind of like two important lessons from this story. First is that herbs and wisdom of Osain played a very important role in the consecration of Aye. And second is that Eshu should never be excluded from any prosperity work, because he remains one of the strongest forces that govern the movement of distribution of wealth. So every time that someone wants to do any spiritual work, we have to give Eshu his part, right? We have to share with Eshu, because Eshu is one of the divinities that are aligned with this with Orishaye. All right, so I want to talk about when Aye withdrew to the forest. It's another important short story. One day Aye began to wonder whether people really truly appreciate her. right? So did they really need well, or had they simply become accustomed to her presence? So to find out, she decided to leave the world and hide herself away. But before she departed, Aye did something important. She consulted Ifa and made Edbo. She also fed Eshu before leaving. So even Aye, the force of will itself, follow divine guidance and made sacrifice. So what happened afterwards? Well, she hid deep within the forest, and the effects were immediate. People could no longer obtain the things they needed or desire. The trade started to slow down. Opportunities disappear. Prosperity became scarce. The world began to struggle. So they were looking for Orishaye everywhere. Where are you, Orishaye? They pray. They were worried. And they all suffer from her absence. So eventually, uh, they went to Orumila and they also performed a bow, and it was Eshu who revealed where she was hiding. So because Aye had honored Eshu before leaving, he helped to reveal her location, right? So the people found Aye and they approached her with respect and offering. They appeased her and they asked her to return so that life can make sense again. So once she was satisfied, Aye came back, and prosperity began to flow again. So I would like to say that this story teaches also two important lessons. First is that wealth should really never be taken for granted. Okay, when people become careless, ungrateful, disrespectful towards prosperity, wealth can withdraw from their lives. And second is that Mm, I, the path to Aye often passes through Eshu. The movement, discovery, and return of wealth are very close connected to him. And the story ends with a very powerful reminder. Is that Aye might be hidden in your life, but she can be found. By those who are willing to seek her with sincerity, sacrifice, and respect. All right, up to this point, are there any questions, guys? And feel free to just jump into your mic and ask them, okay? Or write them in the chat. No question, guys?
Actually, I had a quick one, Baba. Just real quickly. Um, so anybody can receive Orisa Aje, or is this something that should be marked by consultation, or in some cases when somebody has been initiated, right? At least my understanding when we do Ifa, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's not just one Odisha that we would initiate into, but I guess simply
Mhm.
would um one have to have Aj marked
Mhm.
in their destiny to be able to receive it.
Yes. Okay, so this one is a very, really good question. And the answer is the following. There are odus of initiation that are more associated with the divinity of Aye. For example, ogbeate. Ogbeate is one of the odus that the person needs to venerate Orishaye because it's one of the odus where she came to the world. And so Ogbeate is also very associated with Eshu. So whoever comes with initiation Odu Ogbeate, we tell that person to receive Orishaye because he needs to do an extra care of that divinity. And well, you might be wondering, okay, there's people that they don't have Orishaye and then they do really good with businesses, wealth, prosperity. These people don't have the divinity, and yet the divinity is with them. Uh, well, then you need to think about what I just told you. What are the behavior patterns that these people have with their wealth? Do they spend it in unnecessary things? Do they brag about? Do they invest the money? Do they save money? And the reality is that the more money you have, the more money it's gonna come to you. Money is indeed a magnet. That's why it's important to actually have physical money in your house. Okay, so there are odus where the person needs to receive aye because they are actually doing something wrong. So it's not that Orishaye is gonna just come into their lives and all of a sudden, oh, money is gonna come to my life. No, Orishaye is gonna come to your life, but there's something you need to change in your life in order to have Orishaye work for you. So it's very important that do not have the expectations of, oh, I'm going to receive Orishaye and everything is going to turn from night to day all of a sudden. No, I just explained to you guys that Orishaye wants to see you working. She wants to see you working hard, not be lazy. She wants to see you to have a source where that money comes from. Okay, so and at the same time, we are learning that your Ori is the one who will make it happen for you. So that's why if somebody comes for me for consultation and they are like, man, I have no money, money for me becomes all on water. What do I do? Or my first question is, what is the career that you study? You study a career. Oh no, when I was supposed to be studying, I was dating this guy, and I miss school, and I'm not studying. I don't have a career. Well, then Risha says that you need to either uh, study a career or go and work hard for the money because that's the only way that money is going to come for you. But at the same time, there are some odus that, and this is something that we're going to learn a little bit better in the presentation, that because Isheshe has a very um, conservative set of rules about how family should grow. So the roles of men and women over there are very conservative compared to the roles of men and women here in America. So there are certain odus, for example, Ogunda Bede. No, I'm sorry, no Ogunda Bede, Obejonu, Obe Ogunda, for a woman that might be that she doesn't have a career, but she's a stay-at-home mom. So she is someone who, she depends on the husband, and she likes it that way, right? But then when this audio comes for her, we tell her that Oishaye is going to come in your life. And if this person is also associated with Oshun, this person will tell her, you know what? Try to think about certain numbers. When before you go to bed, think about Oshun, pray to Oshun, and maybe Oshun will put some numbers in your mind, and then you go and play the lotto, and all of a sudden, that stay-at-home mom became rich. So there are very, very interesting ways how Rishaye manifests in the life of people. Okay, but we're going to learn a little bit more about that. Are there any other questions? Did I answer the question? Was it Michael
Yeah,
or? Oh, okay, okay, awesome.
no, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very important that you actually mentioned that, just because you receive Orisa Aje doesn't mean that your life is gonna switch
And not just
overnight.
and
I
not
think
just
it's just more of a
Orishaye,
balance.
And I will say not just Orishaye, any Orisha.
Any Orisha, yep, absolutely.
Don't think that this. So I tell people this is not a magic lamp, and I'm not the genie. Okay,
Absolutely.
so very
It's
important.
definitely about equilibrium and establishing, you know what I'm saying, the harmony that we need between the two. I thank you. That's all.
Absolutely, absolutely, and then responsibility on your behaviors, knowing yourself, know yourself, right? I think Mileto said that, one of these philosophers. All right, so now we're gonna talk about the story of how well chooses where to live. This is a story from Odu Ejiobe. Odu Ejiobe in heaven lived really poor, and he wanted to change his situation, so he consulted Ifa for guidance. So Ifa instruct him to prepare an offering and place it in front of the house at night. So he followed the instructions. So he set the offerings at his doorway with a lamp filled with ori. which Ori is also the word for she border. No, it's not just Ori. I'm not talking about Ori the hand. I'm talking about the she border, right? So then he make the entrance warm and welcoming. So that same night, Aye was descending from heaven to earth. So she was searching a place where she could be welcome, right? And when she saw the light of the house of Eyobe, she was curious about. So she approached the doorway and found the offerings waiting for her. She sat down. She started eating, and she was pleased. So then I spoke to Eyobe and make a promise. Allow me to live in your house, and I will bring wealth and prosperity into your house. And Eyobe gladly accepted. So from that day forward, his poverty came to an end, right? So this story teaches a very, very important welcome about how people need to be welcoming, you know? I was I was talking with my mom about how a lot of people are going to enjoy the World Cup in Mexico because not only is it's cheaper, but the people in Mexico and the people that work for the hotel businesses and businesses in general are very welcoming. So you had to be someone who is welcoming. You had to treat visitors nice. In other words, you need to learn to uh, treat visitors nice. Not to there's a word for that. I just forget now. Welcoming, yeah, I think that's the word. Try to be welcoming, and Oishaye sees that. So if you're someone who treats people nice, she will come to your life as well. Especially if they come to their life, especially if you're someone who maybe you don't have much to give and yet you give away, right? So it's also another important lesson here that we don't really chase well like that in the streets. We can make our home a place for her to come and take care of us. Okay.